Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and drdemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
Hello, this is Scott McDonald from Dr. Demographics, and today I want to talk to you about the potential attitudes of a patient base. Now, generally speaking, we can always tell you how many people there are and competitors that might be found within an area, and that makes it very reliable in terms of demographics. But attitudes are not so easily recorded, and we're matching how attitudes are, how likely a population will be to spend money on healthcare in relation to the location. So we've given each location in the country a score, so to speak, about its attitudes. And that's what we're going to talk about in this session on the demographics of attitude. So stick with me. Now, the demographics of attitude is something that's a little bit of a soft science. You can always count noses and count competitors, but knowing people's attitudes is a little more difficult and nuanced. So I want to talk to you about how you determine an area that will have a favorable attitude toward purchasing your services. Now, I'm sure that many of my audience will be offended by what I'm going to have to say. People usually are when we talk about attitudes and say some locations are favorable and some really are not. It's not my intention to offend anyone. You see, people often interpret my comments as being judgmental. For example, they may assume that I am vilifying a particular political point of view as being valid and another as invalid. That's not so. This episode merely posits that attitudes can be known and understood, and that these attitudes of consumers should be acted upon when choosing a site for practice. In short, look for areas where the attitudes are favorable. After all, finding favorable places to practice is what Dr. Demographics is all about, and we can help you. But let's start with the question: do patient attitudes on healthcare make a difference on the success of a practice in that location? And how is this manifested in a practical sense? Do the attitudes of a population regarding the consumption of healthcare influence the viability of the practice site? The answer is, of course they do. The more difficult question is, how much do those attitudes influence demand? And what favorable attitudes contribute to that outcome? Now, I want to talk about the demographic factors you should be looking for, not just competition, not just growth or money. Let's talk about attitudes. Now, I've been searching for these factors for my entire career. So I hope you know that in discussing this, we're looking at a territory that is untrod. I know that if we can understand these factors, we can predict or project where practices could assume their efforts would pay off. We're in fact stating factually that these are the places where positive attitudes can exist, are likely to exist, and will help you to succeed faster. It is much more complex than just looking for the wealthy. Some people think money is going to result in a good place to practice. Now, just having money does not mean people will spend their money on doctors. They will also have to have above average motivations to invest in healthcare. In short, there must be a will to spend on care, and I want to talk to you about how we determine whether there is a will to serve, to spend money on care. Now, that will to spend is not universally found. It's not ubiquitous. Well, where does it exist? It varies based on the demographics of the residents. Similar residents will have similar demographics, and therefore they will be more positive as a patient base for your practice. Now, one of those factors is age. We're looking for a median age of between 50 and 64. Now, you may be surprised by that. Some people assume the best people to spend are younger and richer, and they may assume that it's older and richer. The demand for healthcare services is most acutely felt at 50 to about 64. Above average net income, not net worth, is also important. People need to have the money to spend. So where can we find those places? We also have to consider a couple of other facts. One is married couples, husbands and wives who are both alive and cohabitating are likely to get health care and to pay more for it than their single counterparts. If they live in owner-occupied housing, they will also spend more, have better credit, and in general demand more healthcare services. So we need to find those kinds of places as well, but there's more. We're looking for non-smokers. Now you may say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, smoking is an indicator of how seriously people take healthcare. Smokers are generally not consumers of healthcare and will tend to pay less. It's just a fact that we found in correlation exercise in demography. Now, another factor is educational attainment. It's not that you have to have a lot of people that have super high education, but we do prefer places with lots of bachelor's degrees and master's degree. But it is not as desirable to find people who have PhDs, believe it or not. They are not as likely to spend as much money as their age and income cohorts. Also, people with low education tend not to spend as much. We also have a couple of other factors. If they are parents with 2 or more living children, they will tend to spend more on healthcare. Believe it or not, their children, adult children very often, will be primary motivators of seeking care. You may ask, where can I find these wonderful cities, these great places? Well, I'm actually going to give you a partial list. St. George, Utah has come up on our actuarial tables. Well, that's number 1. They have the age, the income, the marital status, the housing type to really make this a good place to go. Next would be Tampa, Florida. Tampa, not just the city, but also the region of where Tampa is found in Florida, which is on the West Coast, is a highly desirable area for the kinds of people with good attitudes in healthcare. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Do you get it? Do you kind of get a feel of what I'm talking about? We're talking about young retirees who have education, have had a profession, had a career, and moved on, and are living in single-family dwellings. Las Vegas, Nevada just made the list. Now, Las Vegas has gone up and down in its desirability of its patient base. It's kind of come back up. More people have moved to Las Vegas, particularly because California has encouraged people to leave California, and Las Vegas has been the beneficiary. Fargo, North Dakota. Fargo? Surprisingly, this continues to be one of the better places to retire in the United States, particularly for people with money and homes. Mesa, Arizona is also on the list this year. Phoenix, Arizona, generally as a region has been very popular, but Mesa we've seen is even better than Tucson. Wanatahee, Washington. I haven't been there. I don't know it. I'm just going by the numbers, and it continued to come up on the list. So I thought I'd share it with you. But Knoxville, Tennessee is continuing to rise on the lists of where to go. It's got a growing population that is increasingly affluent, but like these other places, you don't have to spend a huge amount of money. Now, there are other places in the country with more money and more growth, but there are very few that allow people to keep the money that they have as much as Knoxville and some of these other towns. Lancaster, Pennsylvania surprised me, but it came up as well. And looking at the tests of the statistics, it looks better and better every year. Ann Arbor, Michigan, and College Station, Texas. Now, College Station, Texas is particularly favorable because you don't have to pay a lot of money to own a home in College Station. It's centrally located. A lot of people like the idea that it's a warm climate place. Now, you'll notice, by the way, that many sites do feature warmer weather, which is something that people prefer when they retire. But let me express something real quickly. You're not looking, as I'll mention in a minute, not looking for the places where there is super high income or even super low income, where the costs are moderate is what you're looking for. So all of these kind of come into that moderate market. Don't consider that you've got to spend a lot of money in these places. Now, the attitude audit is something I want to share with you. We're trying to determine what people in the target group have demonstrated an interest in buying or purchasing that will signal us to their healthcare choices and lifestyle habits. People who have very high incomes are not necessarily the best patients. It's the people in the middle ranges, the third out of 5 quintiles of income that are good. That's what our target should be. One of the big clues that tells us they will demand health care is age. Older people up to about age 75 are more inclined to want and need discretionary health care services. When you get over 75, a lot of people say, I give up. When they're very young, particularly under 55 years of age, they feel they don't have the need. That's why the median range of age is important. Those with higher incomes and education are generally considered more cooperative and better patients by providers, and therefore are more desirable from the provider point of view. They're likely to travel and receive care from a larger radius. People in that age group will go to a doctor from further away. That makes it more desirable from the point of view of a provider when more providers can have successful practices because the population is growing and is large. Under these circumstances, people with these demographic profiles tend to cluster together, which creates a larger patient base. Now, the point isn't that a rural area won't go because there aren't enough people. What we really want, though, is it to be easy to run downhill. The trends of growth and the clustering of a growing population are highly desirable. That's what we're hoping to find. Rural and urban residents tend to have a smaller percentage of their residents who will be disposed to seek healthcare services, especially if they might be considered too expensive or too extreme for them. That's why we're looking for the median income, median population size. It is usually best for residents to consider themselves outside the extremes of income, neither very rich or very poor, neither growing at a breakneck speed or declining. We're looking for the middle in their attitude. Now, I want to tell you some of the things the tea leaves are telling us about the population you want to consider. Demographers believe this type of patient is on the rise, but not in all corners of the U.S. I'm saying this, in other words, these places will not be like the rest of America. They're becoming more and more unique. So if you find one, hang on to it for dear life. This market will cease to have a great deal in common with the rest of America. In other words, they're becoming more unique. Warm weather, low taxes, very low crime, and that's key. Reasonable cost of living, in other words, you can purchase a home and afford it, have strong retail locations. In other words, shopping malls, they tend to characterize these places and are likely to attract growth. That's key. Now, if you want to talk to someone on the phone, we can provide telephone consultations or do a report to check the viability of the area that you want to consider. We can say, is this a good risk or a bad one? We can say, is it likely to improve or not? So visit us at drdemographics.com or call us at 800-849-0499. This is Scott McDonald. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.